Hello and welcome back to the channel everyone. My name is Sam. In today's video I want to talk about the topic of social anxiety. To some extent this concerns all of us because even though you might not think that you have social anxiety, or maybe you feel quite comfortable and confident interacting with other people, we all sort of know this feeling of being afraid or being judged. Almost everybody has a certain degree of nervousness when it comes to public speaking. Of course, for some people this anxiety is stronger than for others. But social anxiety is also a topic that is of personal interest to me. When I was younger, I suffered quite a lot from this kind of fear and uncomfortableness. So in this video I want to explore what the causes of our social anxiety are and what we can do to maybe challenge those. So first of all, we can obviously notice that people differ to the extent to which they feel uncomfortable around other people, or especially around strangers. If you are quite extroverted, maybe the concept of feeling anxious around other people seems a bit alien to you. Nevertheless, for many people this is quite the huge source of suffering in their lives. It is certainly correct to say that for some people this sort of anxiety is a part of their personality. And our personality is of course formed by different factors. Partially, we can inherit this sort of anxiety from our parents genetically. Then there are also formative experiences that we have that can increase or decrease this social anxiety we feel. For me personally, the amount of social anxiety I had when I was younger was certainly caused by different factors. For one, I have good reason to believe that to some degree the amount of anxiety I had around other people and the shyness and insecurity I felt was something I inherited. But there were also many experiences that reinforced this anxiety. I was naturally quite shy as a child, and being looked at or being the center of attention was always a horrifying experience to me. I felt a degree of discomfort that is really hard to put in rational descriptions when people looked at me. Of course, this wasn't as present all the time and stronger in some situations as opposed to others. But generally speaking, I really didn't like being the center of attention of other people. And this anxiety was compounded by two factors. For one, I always had this sort of pride where I really reacted sensitively to being disrespected. Somebody being disrespectful to me was somehow always quite hurtful to me. It very easily triggered negative emotions in my body-mind and motivated me to be angry or even seek revenge in extreme cases. And this put even more pressure on my social interactions because I was always looking out for ways in which I was disrespected. And as you can imagine, that's quite stressful and unhealthy. But then my life experience made this even worse. Growing up, I faced quite a bit of racist discrimination, and these experiences were quite painful to me. Even more so because I was sensitive to being disrespected. So it wasn't just that I was naturally uncomfortable around strangers. Now I also had this fear of people being abusive towards me, of having to defend myself, of having to regain the respect that I felt was threatened. And this of course makes social interactions even more uncomfortable. I felt like I always had to be on guard for an attack, always sort of ready to strike back. And because of that, I mostly avoided unnecessary social interactions. But since we humans are social beings by nature, that is obviously not a healthy and sustainable way to live long term. For a long time, my answer to this social anxiety I had was to improve myself. I thought maybe I can compensate for this lack of confidence and this vulnerability by just becoming stronger, more successful, better. I essentially wanted to put on a really thick armor that would protect me from outside attacks, make me immune to these negative emotions that I would feel around other people. And maybe to some extent it helped. Through this path, I diminished the insecurity I felt. I felt more confident, and that was better. But still, this feeling of being uncomfortable, this feeling of being looked at and judged, this very basic fact of thinking that I am this limited entity which is an object to other people, persisted. So while my social anxiety decreased through my self-development, there still persisted this very basic neurotic fear of being looked at, being judged, being the object of attention for other people. And it was only later in life that I came to question this very assumption about myself. I started to question whether I really am just an object to other people, whether I am this bag of meat with a mind inside that is just a thing for other people to look at and judge. Eventually, through my spiritual exploration, I discovered that my true nature is much more amazing than this limited body mind I thought myself to be. What I actually am is dimensionless, space-like awareness, without bounds and totally free. And this insight actually started to go to the root of my social anxiety. Instead of building another layer of armor, I started to question the very existence of the being that was behind this armor. I saw that what I actually was, my real being, didn't need any protection. I discovered that what I essentially am doesn't need to be afraid of being judged. I saw that this limited entity that I thought existed in my head, that was always afraid of being the center of attention, wasn't really there. And more I noticed that this neurotic feeling of being looked at, being uncomfortable with it, disappeared. I remember quite vividly that there was one moment in university where I raised my hand and, as happens, everybody looked at me. But what amazed me in that moment was that this very basic feeling of being looked at wasn't there. Now, I was still functioning, of course. I could still talk, I could still see people looking in my direction, but this very basic feeling of being a neurotic, separate self in a body mind that was now being looked at wasn't there anymore. Instead, there was this sort of freedom, this openness. It felt like I was let out of a cage. Maybe in of itself that doesn't sound very spectacular, but this shift for me was quite dramatic and noticeable. This essential discomfort I had in interaction with other people wasn't there anymore. Now, don't get me wrong. For some people, it's quite natural to not be as socially interactive, to feel more uncomfortable around other people. That is fine. I still don't like public speaking. I still enjoy being alone quite a bit. And I'm still not very extroverted and love talking to strangers. But what I'm saying is that this essential feeling of being a separate self trapped inside a body was actually the root cause of my social anxiety. And on this root cause, layers upon layers of suffering were built. Extreme tendencies of emotional reactiveness were shaped over my life. But then, when I looked and saw that the separate entity doesn't actually exist, all those layers of insecurity, of discomfort started to dissolve. More and more, I was able to act freely around other people, be myself, let my body-mind express itself freely. My personality could now shine. Now, working as a psychologist, I actually make my living talking to strangers. And I don't feel uncomfortable at all doing that. Far from it. I actually quite enjoy it. I can now enjoy being in the presence of other people, even if I've only known them for 1 minute. I can now just be this open space for them. Take them in for what they are, without feeling like I'm being looked at and judged. This freedom allows me to be empathetic. And the people you interact with will notice that. They will feel comfortable around you. The fascinating thing is that if you yourself get rid of this belief of being a separate self, people who interact with you will notice that, and in turn, they themselves will also feel less like being a neurotic separate self. So in conclusion, if you want to get rid of your social anxiety, don't just improve yourself endlessly with the hope of that one day you will be strong and good enough that you won't feel anxious anymore around other people. It is quite natural to feel a certain degree of nervousness and tension around other people, especially depending on who they are. But the fear of being a separate neurotic self stuck inside a body-mind is not natural. This can be seen through as an illusion. You can come to discover the inherent freedom that lies in your true nature. And this really is the only way to go to the root cause of your anxiety. I hope you enjoyed this investigation of social anxiety. Let me know what your own experiences are with this topic. Are you someone who's anxious around other people? How has that changed throughout your life? Has meditation or spiritual inquiry maybe changed that anxiety for you? Just let me know in the comments. If you want to stay up to date on my latest videos, also consider subscribing, and I will see you here next time.